Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, Just Draw Something, where we learn to draw together. Today I will be drawing my original character, and this will be a part of a 3-video series. The first video I will be sketching her, the second one I will be inking her, and the third one I will be coloring her. We will use some techniques in my previous video, like shapes, perspective, and hair. Although we didn't really cover much in perspective, we will go ahead and use a semi-dynamic pose, but one that is simple enough to draw. I will go ahead and explain the process and slow it down a little bit so that way you guys can follow along. I will be drawing on my iPad Pro. With Procreate, you do not need Procreate to draw. You can use a pencil and paper. Just make sure you sketch lightly so that way you can erase any mistakes or any guidelines that you may use. Also, Procreate and Photoshop are great to use as well. All right, guys, let's get started. Here we go. And we are off. All right, so what we are going to be doing in this video is we are just going to be sketching out our character. Now, I always like starting with the head, so I just do a basic circle on the head, and then I do an X where I want the face to sort of face. Haha, sort of face. Wow, that was a pun that was not needed. From here, I'll do just all the basic things. I'll go ahead and map out my face with lines. I'll go ahead and add the jaw, connect the neck, and then I'll just start working down. The torso, for me, I personally just use a circle as well. I know some people do use a square. I just try to visualize the planes that I am working with when drawing the torso. So I also make sure to draw an X just so that way I can see the center, and I kind of draw the circle with sort of a little flat edge so that way I can also figure out where I'm going to be placing my shadows. For me, I'm not exactly sure how I learned to draw. I know that my mom was into drawing, but when I was young, I wasn't a prodigy or anything at all. I couldn't draw, and I just kind of watched my mother. Then I kind of got into anime, and then I just started drawing anime without really knowing what I was doing. This was around age 12, and I just kept drawing, and I kept getting better and better using references. I kind of am using a reference for this. The pose isn't really made like in a picture. I am taking several different pictures and kind of combining the torso and combining the hips in the way I want them placed. You guys gotta always use reference. I don't care what anybody says. I was one of those people who said, I will never use references because I don't want to imitate something that's already in the real world. But by doing that, I slowed down my progress by a landslide. So always draw with reference, and when you do draw with reference all the time, eventually you'll wean off of drawing with references and actually improve in other ways. You'll be able to have your mental library, which will be able to let you just draw without reference and draw from imagination. Some of this I am drawing from imagination, the hand, the face, just because I don't feel I need a face. So keep practicing, guys. You will get better. Your mental library will become more fuller. Just keep practicing. For hands, there's really no shortcut. You really should just study the basic anatomy of a hand or just the basic shapes of a hand. For me, when I try to draw hands, which I still struggle with today, I need several different references so that way I can draw the hand. A quick tip, I would say that you have your own body to work with, and if you have a smartphone, perfect, that is great. My suggestion is if you are going to draw a hand you are unfamiliar with, just simply take a picture of your hand in the position that you would like your drawing. Either trace over it or trace over it and find all the basic shapes so that way you can memorize how to draw it in that position, and then just keep on drawing it without tracing it once you've learned all those basic shapes. Trust me, it is probably the fastest way to learn hands without learning anatomy. I would like to stress that when I use my guidelines, they are not a 100% definite position where I will put my lines. Now, you got to use guidelines as guidelines, because if you follow them too closely, something could end up being messed up, and then you could get demotivated, and you could say, oh, well, I don't want to finish this picture because something just doesn't look right. That's why guidelines are called guidelines. They are simply a guide. You need to go ahead and add what you need to make your finished picture look good, or just your sketch look good. So remember that guidelines are guidelines. They are not permanent lines. So here I am carving out the hairline. Now the hairline is very suggestive to the person's personality. So if you're drawing like a villain or whatnot, their hairline might be higher, or their hairline might be lower if they're a dwarf, or whatever standards you have for higher, lower, or middle hairlines. I kind of like making mine a little more just in the center. So it's really up to you where you'd like the hairline. And then when I draw the hair, I kind of just figure out where the part's going to be on my main character. She has quite the heavy part on the left side of her head. And from there, I like just making the form of the hair. I'll use lines to sort of feel the flow of the hair and what am I going to do for it when it comes to the inking stage. In the sketching part for hair, definitely you want to add a lot of lines, so that way you can visualize the flow of hair. Now that helps me, it might not help another artist, but in the beginning when you are drawing, it's hard to imagine where the hair is going. So pick where you want the hair to come from on the scalp and then draw it out at least an inch above the scalp. A lot of new artists, there's a mistake that I find quite often, is that they will draw their hair too close to the scalp and it will kind of look a little off, unless it is a stylized piece where all of your characters are like that. It's not generally a good look. If you look in the mirror at your hair, you will find your hair doesn't sit flat on your head or plastered to your head. So just remember that the next time you draw your character's hair, to draw it a little bit off the scalp. Usually after I do the hair and place all the features that I am trying to place, like the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, I will go ahead and start fleshing out an outfit. For this character, I already kind of know what I want her to wear. There is some room for improvement, which I will go ahead and show you guys the picture at the end of this video of what she looks like, a fully done picture. But I drew that a little bit ago and I have learned much better techniques now in order to convey the look of my character the way that I want her or him to look. Now for her outfit, I kind of want my character to be like sort of free-spirited, sort of a little rustic, a little accessorized, so just a combination of things, a little, you know, hip, a little stylish, but still very toned down. So what I have her wearing is kind of like a half jacket, a long shirt underneath, and a muffler on top, or a scarf, whatever you want to call it. And then I have her just wearing a pair of shorts. But when I drew the full picture, she was kind of wearing, or she is kind of wearing some Converse. I might change those to boots later on. I'm not sure exactly what I want her to wear because she's still in her infancy of being developed. So now I take this picture and I do a bit of a darker pencil. Now, when I did start on just pencil and paper and drawing, I did this step as well. I just darkened all the lines and took all of the clothes and just redefined them. So that way I knew what lines were which and what lines are going on. Because when you have a very sketchy picture, it's kind of hard to visualize, especially for beginners, what you wanted. So this layer will just make sure that you know, and it will give a visual representation of what the lines are supposed to be. So for example, her neckline versus her jacket, and her hair versus her head. All these lines will be a lot more defined for this, so when it comes to the inking process, then you are able to clearly see what your vision was in the beginning. Now, just because you are inking doesn't mean there isn't room for change. This isn't the final one. These are still technically guidelines. These are just much clearer guidelines than your sketch copy. So I will still make a lot of changes in the inking process, whether it be the tips of the hair, whether it be the detail in the hair or the detail in the clothes. This just gives me a very clear guide to where I want this picture to go. On this as well, I use this for somewhat of inking guides. So for instance, like where the lines connect, where like the jacket and the waist connect, you'll notice the ink is kind of thicker right where they connect. I'll start adding these little details so that way when I ink, I know where I am going to pop a line. So that line will usually be thicker where there's a shadow. So one thing that I did find about a few artists, or actually a lot of anime artists, is when they draw dark lines, it's usually where a shadow is going to be. So if they're inking a hair that is in the back, sometimes that ink will be a little bit thicker and a little more defined. Or if they have a belt, under the belt, it's going to have a thicker ink line because there's going to be a shadow there. Or if they are trying to separate some hair where there's going to be a little bit of a shadow, so that way the bang is separated from the rest of the hair, then they'll draw a thicker line to sort of separate those. I follow these rules even for my inking because I feel it makes the picture look a little more dynamic. So at this point, I will say I really do not like her hips. So I'm gonna go ahead and adjust them as necessary. This layer is great for that. Even if you didn't get this in the sketch layer, you kind of know what you want in this layer. So before I didn't know if I wanted her in shorts or if I wanted her in jeans. So that's why I didn't add this and fix this in the sketch layer. I thought it might have looked good in the sketch layer, but it did not to me. So instead of doing that, I just fixed her leg to something I find more appealing. Now, art is very suggestive because somebody might have said, oh, I liked her leg before, but I didn't like her leg, so I'm gonna change her leg. I will also do a lot of things with this layer. So with the sketch layer, it's just kind of a plan, like, this is kind of where I want it to go. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but it's kind of where it's going to go. In this layer, I'll start adding other things. I'll start adding belts if I have belts, or buckles, or any item that she's sort of carrying. Other things I'll add is things on the clothes. So if the clothes have a logo, a circle, whatever, a pattern on the clothes, I will add it here as well. Another thing I would add here is if my character had any lace, or if her scarf was a desert scarf and had tassels hanging down from it, I would add things like wrinkles and all of that to this picture specifically. I usually don't add that to the sketch because usually with the sketch I'm working with the guidelines, I'm working with the basic shapes, and those things aren't really going to be present in the video or in the final piece. So I usually just work on this layer with the finer details. Speaking of details, it is very important to get your hands perfect in this stage of the drawing. I only say this because when it comes back to going to the ink layer and your hands are not where you want them to be in this rough sketch layer, then you're gonna run into a lot of problems. It is much more difficult to fix your hands in the inking layers. So make sure you get them done here. There has been several times when I was like, oh, you know what? I am just gonna wait till my inking layer to finish my hands. But then when you have the lines for the inking, which are a lot more permanent than these lines, you kind of start messing up proportions of the body. You kind of start messing up proportions of your arm and all this other stuff, which I guess the arm would be the body, but just avoid doing your hands on your inking layer or anywhere close to your final piece, because 9 times out of 10, for me at least, I will stop drawing at that point because I am so frustrated that I just want the drawing to be done at that point. So I don't know if any of you guys are the same, but just make sure you finish your hands before the inking layer begins. Now at this final sort of kind of area of the drawing, I will go ahead and make some minor necessary adjustments to areas that I find to be difficult, and I will go ahead and further do some sort of inking guides where I want the ink to be heavier on her. So where there will be shadows, I will generally add more sketch lines, so that way I know exactly where I want the lines to darken. There's a lot of different tips for inking. Everybody's inking is different. I tend to follow where there's going to be a shadow, the ink line should be heavier. So you guys don't have to follow that, but those are kind of my rules for making my lines look a little more weighted and dynamic. But that's just my own personal style. I suggest that you find a style that you like. All right, I will say that is pretty much it. I would highly suggest always using reference pictures in your drawings. I have several references for this drawing, but I am essentially taking the torso of one and trying to figure out how to draw that, and the legs in the other, and trying to draw that. Always make sure you use reference, guys. It's very, if not the most important thing you can do to draw faster. End of the video, and here we are. Hopefully you guys learned something new today. With me drawing my original character and applying some of the basic concept and rules that I did in my other video, I was able to create a whole character and have her look semi-decent. Remember, the next step is to ink her, but we are going to ink her in another video because I feel inking deserves its own entire video. Alright guys, as always, feel free to leave critique and feedback in the comment below. Don't forget to drop a comment of something you would like to be drawn. I will go ahead and learn that, and I will go ahead and teach you the process I learned to get there. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. Have a great day, guys.